Takaa vanha Väinämöinen, toinen Seppo Ilmarinen, kolmas Lieto Lemminpoika, tuo on kaunis kaukomieli. Läksi selvälle merelle, lakeille lainehille, tuonne kylmähän kylähän, pimeähän Pohjolahan, miehen syöjähän sijahan, 10 urohon upottajahan. Kempä tuossa soutajaksi. Yksi on Seppo Ilmarinen, sepä tuossa soutajaksi, airoillen ylimmäisille. Toinen Lieto Lemminkäinen, airoillen alimmaisille.
The phone rang. I received a call from Italy from our customer Antonello Madonna. He had an idea for a special custom guitar, an art guitar perhaps. At that point I think neither Antonello nor I had the slightest idea of just how very unusual this project would turn out to be. Now, 4 years after that first phone call, looking back, it has to be the most peculiar guitar project I've ever encountered in my life. Imagine this, Antonello, a die-hard guitar enthusiast and collector, a guitarist rooted in the late 1960s Italian prog rock scene. He also had a fascination with Finland, particularly our culture and history, focusing on the ancient mythological aspects like the Kalevala. This 19th century compilation of poetry, often described as the national epic of Karelia and Finland, intertwines with the interests of Antonello's son Alberto. Alberto is drawn to Finland's vibrant metal music scene, which is also in many ways rooted in Kalevala-related myths and landscapes. The Kalevala mythology has inspired many artists and authors worldwide, both in ancient and modern times, including J.R.R. Tolkien, whose Elvish language grammar is based on the Finnish language. We had crafted a Kalevala-themed guitar once before, nearly 20 years ago. The artwork was based on the famous painting Defense of Sampo by Akseli Gallen-Kallela.
Jopa muiksi muutalti he tohti toisiksi ruveta. Otti 5 viikatetta, 6 kuokan kuolioa. Nepä kynsiksi kyhäsi, kohenteli kouriksensa. Puolen purtta särkynyttä senpä allensa asetti, laajat siiviksi sivalti peräpuikon purstoksensa. 100 miestä siiven alle, 1000 purston tutkaimeen, 100 miestä miekallista, 1000 ampujaurosta. Levitäikse lentämään, kokkona kohotteleikse, lenteä lekutteveli tavoitelle Väinämöistä, siipi pilviä sipaise, toinen vettä vieprahteli.
In Kalevala poetry, the Sampo is depicted as the ultimate source of prosperity, a magical mill capable of producing an endless supply of gold, salt and grain. The artwork by Gallen-Kallela is based on one of the most exciting chapters of the poetry, where the steady old Väinämöinen and his companions engage in a decisive battle over the ownership of the Sampo with their arch-enemy Louhi, the powerful matriarch from the north. Louhi is depicted in the story as an evil woman with witch-like powers. Finally, in the midst of the struggle with Louhi, who had transformed herself into a giant eagle, the Sampo is broken and its fragments scattered into the ocean. Louhi departs, uttering dire threats. Väinämöinen, gathering up what fragments of the Sampo he could find, buries them where they would bring prosperity to his people. In that first defense of Sampo guitar made 20 years ago, we replicated the famous painting as a complex inlay work, a hand-cut puzzle of hundreds of pieces of mother of pearl, wood and metal. And now Antonello asks me on the phone if we could maybe work on the same theme, defense of Sampo, as depicted by Akseli Gallen-Kalevala, but from a new perspective. I think Antonello meant it as a figure of speech to not just replicate what we had done 20 years ago, but the way he phrased it, a new perspective, actually gave me a very concrete idea. What if we could step into that old defense of Sampo painting and observe the view three-dimensionally, like inside a computer game, change the perspective and show people how the fighting scene played out through steady old Väinämöinen's eyes. So I blurted out this idea to Antonello, who liked it and asked me to send him a draft, which quickly revealed a weakness of mine. I mean, I can draw, but not in this way. I'm not an artist who can imagine such a scenario, and the way I see it in my mind, or the way that it would make any sense. In other words, I needed help, and the first person I came to think of was my daughter, Juno. She has drawn and painted since she was a little girl. She's very talented and has this cartoonish style that I thought might be a great fit. Juno agreed to do a quick draft, and when Antonello saw and approved the draft and the brainstorming on the further details of the project continued, it started dawning on me that we were not, in fact, talking about a guitar anymore. No, this was turning into an adventure, traveling back in time to medieval Finland, to the age when the poems later to be collected into the epic Kalevala were alive, told at a campfire, from one to another, in cottages from a traveler to dwellers, at marketplaces as the latest entertainment number for the farmers, as that was the only way to pass the stories on in these ancient times. And this is, in fact, the real beauty of the Kalevala. The sheer miracle that such a rich legacy of folk poetry and language survived through the ages, spoken or sung from generation to generation, weaving together a fabric of thousands of years of Finnish culture from ancient times when a written form of the Finnish language did not yet even exist. Antonello had read about a medieval sword discovery. An ancient tomb was found back in the 1960s, not more than 20 kilometers away from our workshop. An unusually ornamental sword with a bronze hilt was salvaged from the tomb, and as Antonello phrased it, this was the perfect fit for Väinämöinen to point at Louhi in the defense of Sampo scene, to be laid out on the guitar. And at this point, Antonello wanted us to also include a replica of this sword in the case with a guitar. Okay, we're not swordsmiths, but this definitely required a bit of field research. Antonello, Juno and I visited the National Museum in Helsinki to see the actual sword with our own eyes.
That is the one that is having the most of decoration.
Even the hilt, it resembles almost Thor's hammer shape. You can see that the material even is completely different from the swords next to it. It's bronze, even the signature oxidized color of the bronze, this green color, it's really different.
We also paid a visit to the original location where the sword was found. And the visit was guided by Professor Eero Ojanen, a historian who has written numerous books related to ancient myths, and also a book about Suontaka Manor history including detailed information on how the sword was discovered.
The theory was a little bit unclear whether it's a woman or less. Or even more so.
Of course.
Because Ilmar came
out with this crazy idea.
And then a little miracle took place. One evening I did an internet search and lo and behold, found out that the medieval enthusiasts have not only their festivals, but also their dedicated sword makers in our modern age to replicate the treasures of the old. So I went ahead with online shopping and ordered a beautifully detailed full-size replica of this national treasure, the Suontaka sword, complete with a tempered steel blade, leather scabbard, and matching copper fittings. So now we had the sword, only the guitar was missing. Characteristic of my workshop, each instrument is built without the aid of any modern automated technologies. Moreover, each instrument is crafted from scratch to finish by a single luthier. In this case, yes, we wanted to stick to our old school handcraft skills, but unlike most other guitars, the defense of Sampo guitar would be a teamwork effort, involving a group of artisans from different crafts, and the work happened in parallel realities, simultaneously in many locations. Before we could unleash my guitar making team, my daughter Juno had to refine the artwork. There were also technical aspects that needed planning at this stage. The guitar model was to be my first original design instrument, the Duke, and the pickup of the guitar was to be the Valvebucker, or vacuum tube driven active pickup, the only one of its kind in the world. And in this guitar, what would be more fitting than the Valvebucker pickup assuming the role of Sampo, that magical mill of eternal prosperity. Our plan was to combine several different techniques and craftsmen to bring the Battle of Sampo to life. The majority of the artwork on the body, fretboard and headstock was to be done by master Marquetry artist Taneli Äikäs, who ended up piecing together a wood Marquetry puzzle of 668 hand-sewn pieces of birch, maple, oak, cherry, rosewood, among other species. A total of 96 hours of meticulous craftsmanship for the Marquetry artwork alone. The guitar itself, the woodwork and construction, was mainly handled by master luthier Tomi Nivala. He has crafted a significant portion of the Duke guitars at my shop for nearly 20 years now, so this was an easy choice. In many ways, geometrically and material-wise, the guitar was a Duke, through and through. So nothing out of the ordinary really there, but we had to take certain extra measures to ensure the artworks were perfectly embedded on the front of the guitar, covering the body, the fretboard and the headstock. We also envisioned Väinämöinen's hand and the sword to be distinct as a wood carving rising three-dimensionally from the top of the guitar. This task was mainly executed by our master woodcarver Jani Rinta-Keturi. The hand and the sword were to be embedded into a precisely routed cavity on the top with the tip of the blade extending onto the fretboard. And to finalize the sword blade, we called in gilding master Seppo Laakkonen. Our initial plan was to have the sword blade silver plated, but we ended up following Seppo's advice to use palladium leaf instead. Silver would oxidize over time, we learned, while palladium would not. And by the way, I was also told that palladium is named after the asteroid Pallas, which in turn was named after Pallas Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, craft and war. In mythology, the palladium was a sacred object or statue believed to have been sent from heaven to protect the city of Troy. It was said that as long as the palladium remained within Troy's walls, the city could not be conquered. Cool. Now we had the Greek goddess Pallas Athena protecting our hero Väinämöinen and his sword. And our project. Our senior master luthier Jyrki Kostamo is the guy who constructs the electronics of all our Valvebucker pickups. And this was to be his task for the Sampo guitar as well. There are over 100 parts in every Valvebucker pickup. Resistors, capacitors, diodes, circuit boards, vacuum tubes, wires, mechanical stabilizers, and so on. The magnetic pickup capsule is wound for us by Harry Häussel in Burladingen, Germany. A lot of thought and hours go into the circuit design by Lasse Ukkonen and Jorma Kostamo, and many working hours in manufacturing and assembling the circuit and its floor unit at our shop. For this particular Valvebucker pickup, the aesthetics, remember Sampo, were to be something outstanding. In the Kalevala texts, Sampo is described as providing a trinity of prosperity, gold, salt and grain. The task was given again to Jani, who made drafts and carved different versions of the Sampo, but we weren't really happy with the results. No matter how he did it, the pickup felt like, well, glued on or just not a great fit with the rest. In the end, I remember Jani and I were having a coffee break and kind of bordering on a quarrel about how it should be made. So we went back to the Kalevala scripture and studied what is written about Sampo. Back to the roots. And with goosebumps we noticed that not only had we had difficulties in forging the Sampo, but in the Kalevala writings, the blacksmith Ilmarinen also attempted again and again, failing every time. And the actual description of the Sampo is really cryptic. Hard to make this or that out of it, but there are two words that repeat over and over. Taivaan kirjokansi. Taivaan kirjokansi, translating to the starry sky, basically. And that's when it hit us. We had tried two complicated approaches. Instead of ornate wood carvings all over, we decided to let the material, the figured Arctic birds, speak. And we would simply depict the round shape of the Valvebucker pickup cover as the starry sky. Taivaan kirjokansi. And to be precise, Jani, a great enthusiast of astronomy, didn't want to settle by simply drilling holes arbitrarily to create a starry sky. No, our Sampo starry sky, taivaan kirjokansi, matches how the star constellations appear when viewed from Finland. As a little additional detail, Jyrki boosted the starry sky effect with a couple of bright LEDs hidden under the pickup cover.
Lietsoi tuulet löyhytteli. Itä lietsoi länsi. Etelä enemmän lietsoi pohjainen kovin porotti. Lietsoi päivän. Lietsoi toisen, lietsoi kohta kolmannenkin. Tuli tuiski ikkunasta, säkehet ovesta säykkyi. Tomu nousi taivahalle, savu pilvihin sakeli. Se on Seppo Ilmarinen. Päivän kolmannen perähästä kallisti he katsomaan ahjonsa alaista puolta. Näki sammon syntyväksi, kirjokannen kasvavaksi. Siitä Seppo Ilmarinen takoja iänikuinen, takoa taputtelevi, lyöä lynnähyttelevi. Takoi sammon taitavasti. Laitahan on jauhomyllyn, toisehen on suolamyllyn, rahamyllyn kolmantehen. Siitä jauhoi uusi Sampo, kirjokansi kiikutteli, jauhoi purnun puhteessa. Yhden purnun syötäviä, toisen jauhoi myötäviä, kolmannen kotipitoja.
While the guitar construction proceeded, we also had to think about the case for the instrument and the sword. A case, or as I envisioned it, more like an old chest, complete with forged hardware. I mean, in some bizarre way, it felt right that this ancient mythology meets visual arts meets steampunk-style guitar, custom-made for an Italian prog rock pioneer, would be nestled into a medieval-era correct chest. So we crafted the case from solid Finnish alder and called in master blacksmith Tomi Nivala to work his magic with the metalwork. We gave him more or less free rein to do what he wanted, including a hand-forged latch mechanism to secure the chest. Another master craftsman or craftswoman from our own team, Emma Elftorp, stepped in to design the interior of the case. Custom fit cavities for the guitar itself, the sword, the floor unit of the Valvebucker, and for accessories including a custom-made leather shoulder strap by Katalarisuo, complete with the traditional Hannuvaakuna emblem from pre-Christian Finnish religion, a symbol typically drawn or painted on walls of buildings to protect against bad luck and evil spirits. A fitting symbol when merged with the power of Sampo and the sword with the blade forged of palladium, giving Antonello and his son Alberto the ultimate protection against all evil. When it all started to come together, the excitement and magic in the air were literally tangible. Drilling the bridge holes, for example, my heart was thumping like crazy. Thinking of the crazy amount of hours everybody had put into the guitar already, and now handing the bits and pieces to me, quite the responsibility. Last but not least, the client, whom I count every bit the visionary of the project as myself and the rest of my team. Antonello and his son Alberto, without whom this project would not exist. When making custom guitars, the client is always in the role of the initiator of the process, the enabler for me and my team to do what we love to do. So without you, the client, the artist, the player, there would be no us, the makers. And in this case, the client was involved in the process more than usual, meaning that brainstorming the concept itself already took a lot of time, including workshop visits, numerous video calls to coordinate all the bits and pieces. Documentation, that was also assigned to be an essential part of the concept. Another layer of work, recording the work processes, writing this script you hear me citing. And Emma's huge workload of puzzling it all into the documentary you're watching right now. In other words, it's not just a guitar. It's a full-bodied experience, a thrill of a lifetime. And hear that music? The music you hear is composed and performed by Antonello himself. So multiple layers are intertwined in this project. Quite impossible to put it all into words, really. So, just like written in the Kalevala, when the smith Ilmarinen 1,000 years ago finished his Sampo, the day came when our guitar was ready to be sent out to the big wide world.
Here, I believe you might recognize which one is yours.
Yes. This is really. It's a very, very nice idea. Okay, I think that this is unique, probably the same level of the guitar. Emotion. What I can say more? Can I buy one? That is what I was expecting. A signature.
From the whole team.
Yeah, a lot of them.
I have to say thank you.
Antonello,
Thank you for this.
Thank you. What a project. What a project it has been.
It's great.
One to remember. What a project indeed. A unique collaboration of skilled and imaginative arts and crafts people. A big hug and thank you to every member of the team, which includes the client, Antonello, and his son Alberto as well. This wouldn't have been possible without your efforts, our efforts together. Antonello traveled to Finland on a beautiful summer day for a special celebration, a private concert by Antti Paranko in our garden to honor this unforgettable and monumental guitar project. And when Antti played, the moment transcended the ordinary, as if the Nordic gods, goddesses, heroes, heroines of the old had turned their heads in Tuonela to listen. In the Kalevala, Tuonela is depicted as the realm of the dead. Tuonela is where all the souls go regardless of how they lived their lives. Perhaps through Antti's improvisation or the way the guitar seemed to play Antti, we briefly bridged the modern world with the ancient, merging the realms of the living and the dead. Still there? One more thing. After that little private concert you just saw, I had an extremely interesting conversation with Professor Eero Ojanen, who showed us the Suontaka Manor premises. See, in the past, researchers argued that the Suontaka grave had been a double burial of a man and a woman, or that it had been the resting place of a female warrior, indicating that late Iron Age Finland had been home to strong female leaders. But a new DNA analysis has challenged both those theories, finding evidence to suggest that the grave contained the remains of just one person who may have had an extra X chromosome, a genetic condition which can cause people to develop both typically male and female physical attributes. And the buried individual seems to have been a highly respected member of their community, laid in the grave on a soft feather blanket with valuable furs and objects. The person buried in Suontaka may have had a non-binary gender identity, a finding that could suggest a nuanced approach to gender identity in Iron Age Finnish society. Okay, that's very interesting, but here comes the twist. Remember Antonello's original fictional idea of arming Väinämöinen, our hero, with this specific sword in our story. The sword that we have now found out may have actually belonged to a gender-neutral warrior from the past. Well, what Professor Eero Ojanen suggested next really blew my mind. He pointed out that our fictional story doesn't necessarily conflict with reality. See, some studies have linked the name Väinämöinen to Väinämöinen. Well, Väinämöinen as itself is a name without any clear meaning per se, but Väinämöinen, on the other hand, translates directly to the mother of water. So, wait, doesn't this imply that the sword found in a grave just 20 minutes away from our workshop might indeed be the legendary sword of steady old Väinämöinen, who wasn't necessarily quite as macho and manly as we've read from Kalevala? Furthermore, doesn't this also suggest that Finland might have been much more progressive historically than we've realized? However, when Mr. Elias Lönnroth and his peers compiled and edited the old hearsay folklore into what is now known as the Kalevala, they were perhaps limited in the early 19th century by the society of their age with very strict patriarchal gender roles and norms. Who would have thought? Väinämöinen, the mother of water.